the winning move is to not play. And yeah, that's pretty much one of the things I really want to open with, is that interkingdom politics is one of the most stressful things in our game, and one of the more toxic things in our game right now. My first recommendation for people wanting to get into interkingdom politics is to not. And because of that, like, I've seen it claim a lot of people who generally are very strong-willed people. So if you do want to get into interkingdom politics, which and sorry if I'm discouraging, because it is a necessary thing in our game. Only do it if you're strong-willed, and if you're not, if you are in the middle of something, if you're like, suppose you're a future senator and you're in the middle of your reign and you're just like super stressed, there's no shame in resigning. I've seen a lot of people who were titans of service before they got into interkingdom politics just quit. That said, there are some. This is kind of a survival guide for interkingdom politics. Number one, no matter how toxic things get in the interkingdom level, and I will say things are a lot better now, especially that the few people took the Amtgard group, which is a big source of this toxicity, kind of out back and rough it up a little bit. But one of the survival tips I like to say is that no matter how bad things get on the interkingdom level, you can still show up to your park. Your experience there is very likely going to be a positive one. And you can still swing foam or battle game or craft stuff, or the things that got you into Amtgard in the first place. So once you get to that point, if you do get to a point where you're really stressed and all that stuff, just remember the thing that got you into Amtgard in the first place, and maybe go back to that. So the reason why interkingdom politics is so stressful is because there's a lot of people who disagree how kingdoms should behave, how kingdoms should interact with each other. How involved should AI be? How involved should kingdoms be in other kingdoms' business? And there's some kingdoms that really just want to be left alone, for the most part, and there's some kingdoms who really want to get into everyone else's business. And when it comes to dealing with kingdoms who might fall more into either or extreme than you, one of the best skills you can have in being into interkingdom politics, whether it's a senator or whether it's something else, is debating. Debating is your most useful skill. And it's something, and it's like a muscle that you have to exercise and flex, just about any other skill. Like, you always hear leadership is a muscle that you have to work out and practice. And I'm going to post a link into here, but one of my favorite channels to learn debate techniques is this one right here, Charisma on Command. And there's there's a few things that are just like borderline motivational channels in there. Like, they don't really have anything of substance. They're just there to motivate you. But there's a lot of them that show openers to conversation. There's debate techniques shown by people, and some of these people are politicians or people on one side of the aisle that you might not necessarily agree with. In fact, you might hate them. Like, a great example is Ben Shapiro. Yeah, lots of people don't like Ben Shapiro, but he is known as a decent debater, and it shows both. And it actually shows. I've seen a couple of videos. One that shows techniques that he generally uses, and one that shows times where he's failed, times where his technique kind of fell on its ass. And there's different kinds of debate styles. There's the kind that where you're aggressive, head forward like a predator, making point after point, going after the person. And then there's the kind of debate style where you're very welcoming, you're laid back, you welcome arguments, and then you very calmly take them down. And both of those debate styles are usable in different occasions. So definitely learn how to debate. And I don't mean debate like logical fallacies and the rules of debating. That's useful, but not it's not the only part of debating. I wouldn't even consider it 10% of debating. Debating are little tricks and stuff. One of which, for example, is the snuck premise. The snuck premise is you make an argument and you sneak in a point in that argument that you have as a given. Like for Amcard, I might say something like if I'm making an argument about AI, I might say I'd like AI to take care of the ridiculous problem we have in Amcard where battle games are completely unbalanced, and they need to solve the battle game unbalance problem. And the snuck premise in there is, of course, and that's a very simple version, but the snuck premise is, of course, is battle games are unbalanced. Like, that's debatable right there. And by making that point, I might force people to say, well, should AI fix this problem? Should AI not fix this problem? And I'm forcing the debate on that, when really, I snuck in the premise that battle games are imbalanced. That's a completely different argument on its own. So it's sometimes you might want to use something like that when you're debating. It's not the most nice thing to do, but you also need to recognize it. You also need to recognize when people are using it against you. You folks are being very quiet in the chat, so feel free to jump in the chat and ask questions and stuff, and I can respond as stuff like this is going, because this is kind of a panel where and all that stuff. Let's see. Something to not fall into when representing a kingdom as a senator. One thing that, yay, Cena's typing. I'll respond to him after I make this point. When I first started in Interkingdom politics, it was really easy for. That's a good question. I'll get to that in a second. It's really easy to fall into this. There are some very influential people on the COM who can lead the room. It's not even on the COM, it's on AI, who present a good idea and get all the monarchs to agree to it, push it forward, and get a near unanimous vote. And during this vote, you'll see everyone say aye. Yes, we want to do this. We want to go along with this. You'll see everyone say aye, and then one kingdom will say, my kingdom told me to vote no on this. And it's like, oh, okay, we understand. Your kingdom told you to vote no. Well, I vote yes, I vote yes, I vote yes. And when I looked at that, I saw that in my first couple of years, I'm like, what are you even doing here? You're supposed to be representing your kingdom. Like, even if you're the only voice against this, and even if it's like a lost cause, you should be making points against this. You should be bringing this up to your kingdom leaders and being prepared to have this argument. You shouldn't just be going along with everything. That doesn't make you representing your kingdom. That makes you a yes man. And there is, of course, a warning attached to that, and that is, um, if you do have opinions that are against the grain, some pretty bad things could happen to you personally. Like, you could discuss something with your kingdom and the leader of your kingdom, and they could say like, well, we want you to represent this particular aspect. So you do, and a bunch of people in other kingdoms harass you, harass your family. Sounds like I'm being dramatic, but this actually does happen. There are some really terrible people out there. And the worst part is, some of the people who do that are portrayed as the uh, moral high ground by them and their cabal. So getting to into Cena's question, do you think it's easy to fall into? Do you think it's an easy trap to fall into that? Of course, I'm right. I'm me. Yes, it is. And the best way to do that is to hold yourself accountable. Um, Surround yourself with people who you don't necessarily agree with on everything. It is okay for friends to disagree on things. One thing I did as senator, and Cena knows this because he's a part of it, is form a kind of an informal committee full of leaders of your kingdom, so that when a point comes up that you want to make sure you're representing your kingdom and not just representing your own interests, you bring up, hey, this is what's going on, and actually have them help you draft it. Say, this is my response. And there have been times when me and this informal committee, I'd say, this is my response. And they said, that's a little too wordy, or that doesn't bring up these points that we feel is important. Here's my draft of that response that contains those things and removes some stuff that we feel is unimportant. And it goes back and forth through drafts. It is very important to surround yourself with people like of different minds, intellectual diversity, as it's called. Cena's asking another question. Yay. Echo, yeah, echo chambers are bad and should feel bad. And it's something that can happen. A bunch of like-minded people can get into power and they can have very reasonable discussions where they, stealth justify how they can take more power and more power and more power. and convince themselves that it's good for Amtgard or good for whatever they're representing to have their group have more power, because they, of course, represent the best interests. And more of you should type things. Yay, Zaire's typing. Let's see. What else is there about interkingdom politics? Oh, and Zaire, since you were late, your opinion was the best way to resolve interkingdom disputes. Also, Kaads Man Bad. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. So, my if it depends on if the dispute is between two kingdoms and whether or not you are one of those kingdoms. In my opinion, the leaders of Polaris, for example, have a very distinct point of view that it's a virtue to just not get involved. Generally speaking, and there's some exceptions to this, but if something bad is happening in another kingdom, or and someone from an outside kingdom that no one in that kingdom has ever heard of, who doesn't know the situation very well, jumps in and starts making judgmentative arguments, it's not going to go. That's going to escalate conflict. It's not going. There's never been a situation where people have said like, "Huh, well, this person has, the right opinion. This person brought the light of whatever kingdom they're from, and we're just going to lap that up." if one of the kingdoms is you, again, the best, I think the best thing to do is to kind of tell the other kingdom, leave you the hell alone. Most like it. I've seen multiple times knights and leaders from one kingdom say, like, deal with a very complicated situation within their kingdom where everything's not as it seems. And of course, one side, like, it's a dispute, an internal dispute where one side is trying to present the other side, is trying to demonize the other side, and they're both telling half truths. In every conflict there is, one of my favorite lines, there's always three sides. There's one side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth. And all three sides are important. It's not like a lot of people look at that quote and think, oh, it's only the truth that's important. The truth is important, but both sides, how they feel and how they deal with that situation, and like maybe one side was right, but they were also big dickheads about being right. They were poor winners. Let's see. What do you think is a better tactic? Convince they're wrong about something and debate that, or to go to the other voting kingdoms and get them on your side first? Oh, and by the way, the previous tactic, in your opinion, what's the best way to resolve interkingdom disputes? I touched on that, but if you have any more specific questions, go ahead, Zaire, because I could probably have an entire panel on that. Convince someone they're wrong and try about something and debate that. It's really hard to convince someone, especially a nerd, who is, because we are all very smart people. It's very hard to convince someone that they are wrong. I think the best thing to do if you're in a debate that is to present your argument respectfully, and if the other side is also presenting the argument respectfully, then cool. You have two opposing viewpoints. Present your point of view in the best way that you can, and use it not to try to convince the other person, but you're also trying to convince people who are listening in on your argument to try to get them on your side. Like you're not only don't so much focus on attack on the other person. Focus on marketing your idea, marketing your point. That's why I think it's right. And now that we actually have questions, let's start blowing through these. Are there any publicly accessible sections of Zulip for non-monarchs, representatives, AI people to look at? At the moment, no, and that's unfortunate. One thing that I know that they're working on is that there are public sections of Zulip. There's private sections of Zulip, and neither of them are accessible. The public sections aren't. I know that the eventual goal is to dump all the conversations in the public section to an easily accessible website or something, and do like a nightly dump, or just have like a feed or something like that, an RSS feed that's readable and put into a conversation. But that's not implemented yet, and there's a few reps that are getting more and more like upset about Zulip because of that. So I'm starting to become one of them, but but everything in the public channel, I generally just give to the people who want it. Like I do share those aspects with my personal committee if something important happens, or I share it with anybody who wants to know. And that goes for everyone in this chat and anyone listening. If you want to know something that's happening on Zulip, just ask, and usually do my best to spread around what's happening publicly on Zulip with various leaders of Polaris so they can get the word out. See, do you think there should be more policies in place to prevent other reps from going after each other personally? It seems in order to be a senator, a person needs to put ego and self in the back seat, and if they can't do that, they should face consequences. Absolutely, and there is actually a new code of conduct that's being put out, and bullying is against the rules in this new code of conduct, which I think is a long time coming. The unfortunate truth is that it's hard to do something like this. We'd have to put in a gentleman's rule, and I've been kind of trying to preach this all the time, is that we shouldn't like personally attack people or sneak in things or like go after someone personally. We should attack the argument, not the person. I think it's a lot, like I said, since the death of the Amp group, it's been a lot better than it was, but it still happens occasionally. Um, I think that there should be a standard, but it's hard to implement a standard without having that standard used as a weapon. Like if we say you have to be nice to each other and someone says something that other people disagree with, people can jump on that thing and try to twist it so that this person who said something I disagree with is not being nice, because the argument they're making, they sneak premises in there and say and come up with the argument they're making is immoral, therefore they're not being nice to anyone else. So it's hard to come up with a policy that does that, while at the same time it can't be weaponized. How do you keep your sanity when surrounded by the toxicity of interkingdom politics? Feldon. Well, one of the things that I used to use to sync my stress level is AmpGuard, which we can't do right now because of COVID. Having a cat really helps. Kitties are good. They're very good for stress release. Pretty much any stress relief thing that you can think of that would help. Like, give yourself some free time. Don't just work and work and work and work. If you need to sit down for a weekend and just chill and watch Netflix and play video games, then go ahead and do it. Also, be very mindful of your stress level. If you hate, like, stress and depression, and well, depression's a bad term for it, because depression is something that's, inherent and not something that you become. You're a non-depressed person doesn't generally become depressed, because it can be a very physical thing. But one thing that stress can be very creeping. Like, you might not, like, this day might be slightly more stressful than the previous day, and you don't notice it. And then the next day is slightly more stressful, and it creeps up on you. And then I love the kitty. And then, like, 3 months later, suddenly you realize that you've gained 30 pounds. You have a lot less energy than you used to, and you do really just need to keep up on that. And friends of you need to hold you accountable. Like, hey man, this senator position is really, affecting you a certain way, or something like that. And just be mindful of that. So let's see, Cena. So view the debate as more a way to showcase your opinion, convince others, rather than to go being to convince the person you're debating. Yes, definitely do that. Since if one person heavily disagrees with you and they're not changing their mind on the COM, that's one vote. There's 22 kingdoms. So if you can just completely obliterate them in an argument in a respectful way, always go high. Never devolve into personal attacks. Think about someone looking in on a debate between two people. If one of the people is being really aggressive and just going for personal, and going for not even personal attacks, but borderline personal attacks, and just trying to go for that moral high ground, like they're playing King of the Hill, and the other person's being respectful and just saying like, well, I don't think that's the case. I think that it's like this. The person who's making the attacks has lost in a lot of people's point of view. Let's see. Raffle about Zulip Digest, the Amcard.com website isn't. Yeah. Trust me, I know. And that's my wife, by the way. We bitch about that all the time. Also, to people who are listening, Kaads also occasionally gives the players to BOD as an update in our monthly meeting if you want to listen in. I do that. And if anyone has any questions about what's going on in their kingdom politics, they see something happening in another kingdom that they're concerned with, or see someone talking about something on like B&B or something that they're concerned with, let me know. Like, for example, this latest thing that's going on in interkingdom politics, that Polaris, me, actually brought up something and that's there was a park that is they were kicked out of Viridian Outlands, Black Spire, before Viridian Outlands was its own thing, and the I believe Viridian Outlands tried to make a case against them staying a freehold to AI, to Amtgard International. Amtgard International decided, no, we're going to let them be a freehold. So it was more drama between two things. And then this park tried to join the Desert Winds. And in order to join a kingdom that is not your closest kingdom, your nearest neighbor, you need permission from your closest kingdom to join that other kingdom. Well, Viridian Outlands didn't give them permission, so now they can't join the Desert Winds according to our rules. So they petitioned the COM. And my point of view on that, and this is why I brought it up, is that and I don't want to get too deep into this, but I'm just saying this is an example of what's happening. My opinion is that this park, and I don't remember the name of this park, but it could be the worst park imaginable. It could be the most toxic that ever toxic. It could be full of dog muck, thieving kids, and crusty jugglers. But at the same time, that's Desert Winds. If they want to join Desert Winds and Desert Winds wants them in, then they should be free to decide that. I think Viridian Outlands could approach Desert Winds and say, hey, these are the problems we had with the park. This is the stuff we've documented. So then Desert Winds can weigh that into their decision, but it should be ultimately Desert Winds' decision. I think the closest permission thing, that rule that you have to ask your closest kingdom for permission, that's more because we want freeholds to join. We want to encourage freeholds to join the kingdom that's closest to them, but we don't. That's not to be used as a weapon to prevent kingdoms from joining other parks. So I'm trying to have the COM overturned via Viridian Outlands, and also maybe relax those rules so that it can't be weaponized. Let's see. You should post pics of your kitties, just saying. Maybe at the end. There's a chance that one of my kitties will photobomb this thing. We still have 20 minutes left. That's a good possibility. To you, where should the line between not my kingdom, not be problem, and this is a bit much, we need to talk to the IKCOM? Let's see. That's a really good question. I usually err on the side of not my kingdom, not my problem, but there's a few things that we need, like that need to be talked to the IKCOM. Like, for one thing, there's some things that have to be resolved by the IKCOM. Suppose we want to introduce a fifth belt or a battle game belt. Well, to do that, we have to change the rules, and to do that, we have to communicate with the IKCOM. Suppose, pretty much any rules thing or any award standardization thing has to go through the IKCOM. Now, you could always, because the award standardization is kind of a different monster, because a lot of the award stuff is suggested criteria. So if a monarch wants to say, award a sword belt for battle game prowess, they could ignore the rules for sword belt, and that would probably create this Interkingdom incident where people started arguing with them. But they could do that if they really wanted to. Another thing that needs to go to the IKCOM really is if some other kingdom is trying to push values on you. That happens a lot, and sometimes they're really successful. Like, recently, we had that issue where kingdoms were handing out exorbitant amounts of credits, like the Rising Winds and the CK were handing out like 32 credit events. Me personally, and there might be some leaders and players who disagree with me, I don't care. If a kingdom wants to hand out 32 credits for an event for their citizens, it doesn't bother me. It bothered several members of the COM, and honestly, more members were bothered than weren't, for whatever reason. I always say that, like, the number of people who would travel to these kingdoms to get the credits is such a minority, and most of them are veterans anyway who know the rules. Let's see. And I hope he does. I hope he does too. I think he's asleep on the bed. But the cat who usually photobombs my camera things, I think, is asleep on our bed. All right. Any other questions, or shall I ramble on about something else? Let's see here. No, no questions so far. Let's see. I guess I could talk about some other things that have been going on. The, let's see. That concerns a lot of people. There's a rules committee that's currently. Oh, there's people talking. There's a rules committee that's currently talking about two things. One, I believe that the rules reps are in a conversation about opening up paladin and anti-paladin because that failed by one vote at Gathering the Clans. And honestly, I think from what I've heard, a couple of kingdoms voted against their populace. So I think that's just a matter of time before that passes. Number two, the rewards committee is talking about a battle game belt, and yeah, that I think that's a long way to passing based on what I've seen in the COM. The first time when we voted to have the committee look into that, there was like 2 votes no, 20 votes yes. So that was really encouraging. But talking to people about the battle game belt, it's going to be really hard to get us all on the same page, because the question becomes like, well, what qualifies for it? For it? Is it paragons? A lot of people are against the paragon idea, and at this time, in order to get that's award standardization. In order to get a piece of award standardization passed, you need 90% of people voting yes. That's something I'm trying to change to make it more 75%, which is more reasonable. See, what do you want to see out of V9 that other kingdoms most will try to stop? The two things I just mentioned, the battle game belt, which, well, I guess is not part of V9, it's part of award standardization, and the opening of paladin and anti-paladin. I think and how that relates to V9, in my opinion, is that, so there's kind of a misinformation going around, in my opinion, that paladin is a terrible class. It's made for veterans because it's a terrible class. So is anti-paladin. No, they're not. They're amazing classes. They're awesome. Like my Phoenix League team, stacked deck, we usually field 2 or 3, 1 to 3 paladins on our team. And that's like, 1/6 to 50% of our team is paladins. So if it's an underpowered class, that's news to me. In Bridge Wars, Rising Winds Bridge Wars in 2019, both teams had a ton of paladins on them. And the reason is because they're immune to two really good schools. They can wear the second highest armor in the game. They can give out Pro Mag, which is one of the most powerful enchantments in the game. So whenever I hear like that paladin is an underpowered class, I want to just laugh theatrically. What I will say is that paladin is not a unique class. All of its abilities and everything that it gets, other classes get, except for maybe immunities, but that can be granted by enchantments and stuff like that. And barbarian gets immunities, but I guess paladin gets. But anyway, I would love to see Paladin completely rewritten from the ground up so it has its own unique abilities and it is specifically built to counter certain classes or be countered by certain classes. The paradigm that all the other classes are made from. That would be really cool because Paladin is one of the most popular classes in D&D. There's like, I think it's like 1/10 of our new attendees want to play Paladin and another 10th want to play anti-paladin. They're turned off from when they get here. I would love to see that paladin be rewritten into the paradigm to get new abilities. But before that, it basically needs to be unlocked before a new addition to the rules is out. Let's see, how do you handle the fallout when IK politics does affect your personal life? I actually just kind of like that I report I do have contacts on AI and I report that to AI and kind of get things moving. You do have to kind of push back on those things to prevent them from happening. Maybe bring it up to your kingdom, maybe bring it up to the ombudsman. I've gotten people warned about it. There was one person who was banned for it because, but they were in the middle of fighting like a million battles with a bunch of other people, so it probably just wasn't my complaint that did it. Um, but how do you handle the fallout? You usually have having a support network of friends is a good thing too. Video games always helps. Really, like I said, any uh, stress relief technique works. Look up that up on YouTube. There's several books. I don't know what exactly you mean by fallout. So if you could be more specific, great. Let's see, do you think senators monarchs should be able to vote against their kingdom's wishes? I've been through a few conversations on that. I would lean. mm, there's sometimes when the senator or the kingdom or the monarch has access to information that not a lot of people have. So and it's kind of the thing where the mob is easily swayed. Like this is kind of the thing where why we're a representative republic and not a democracy. Like a kingdom could be having a lot of drama like happen within that kingdom, and a lot of people like a Northreach thing would be like a lot of people accusing this kingdom of being racist, and then the monarchs have access to the actual information that's going out there and not just what the mob is saying and what the mob is repeating over and over and over. So the monarchs might look at this information and say, well, we can't really reveal or talk about this information, but this kingdom isn't in the wrong. They handled it the best that they could. And that point, the rep could go back to their kingdom and say, hey guys, I know you want me to vote to like remove this other kingdom, but they I think I've looked at information that and I've talked to our lawyer. I think they're in the right. I'm sorry, but I have to vote against the populace. Luckily, I personally haven't had that happen. See, 90% AK will it never happen. What do you think is the biggest hurdle to get things to agree with each other? Is it just a difference in culture? Yes. It's a difference in culture, and it's also the point. Like, I've kind of been of the opinion that there's certain things that we want to keep universal throughout Amgard, like the rules. We don't want Archer to be handled differently in another kingdom than it is here. Like a rule standardization works. We don't want Druid to have different spells in this kingdom, or armor to be rated drastically differently in this other kingdom. Armor is a bad example because it's kind of designed so that it can be rated different ways, but you get my opinion. There's certain things I think that should be like a lot of people need to consider. Maybe this thing should be cultural. Like maybe we want it so you can earn a battle game belt in certain kingdoms, but can't learn them in others. Like it depends. Like there are some stick jock kingdoms out there that rarely play battle games and have, um, it's mostly ditching and tournaments. They like the foam swinging aspect of that. I look at that and I'm like, I wouldn't want to play in those kingdoms, but the people who play in those kingdoms actually enjoy it, and it probably wouldn't make sense to have a battle game belt there. There's some kingdoms who have a huge tradition about like their knights picking up between a black and white phoenix when they're knighted, and make a big deal about paladin and anti-paladin being knights only, and have that huge tradition thing. And maybe it makes sense for those kingdoms to keep paladin and anti-paladin locked. Um, Maybe it makes sense for a kingdom to have a very strict rules on how they give out credits. And like maybe it's full of people who like that kind of thing. I think that when it comes to, so yeah, that's the big thing, is a difference in culture. There's some people who have a way different culture than we do here in Polaris, and they just don't get that people have different cultures, and that's not going to change. 0% pattern rate of people for SK families, a punishment for SIK politics. Yeah, that's unfortunate. um, and I try, like, I can just say I tried. Let's see. I guess I'll talk more about the differences in culture, because I think that is a really important topic, and one that like a lot of people just don't get. Like I remember Goldcrest, and this is I like and respect Goldcrest. This is something I disagreed with him about when during the whole thing where when credits were like the thing. He said something along the lines of, and forgive me if I butcher this, but we want AmpGuard to be people to have the generally same experience in AmpGuard no matter where they go. Um, and like I said, I could be butchering that line, but that's pretty much what he was trying to present, is that we don't want it so in this region you get 4 credits or an event, and in this region you get this many credits. We want it to be similar no matter where you're at. And I disagreed with him on that. I think that there's going to be different cultures in other kingdoms. If you play in Golden Vale on the East Coast Kingdom, your experience is going to be drastically different than if you played in Texas. And that's okay. Like there's no amount of legislation or voting or any of that stuff that we can do to fix that. It'd be kind of like voting, like like I've said this before to say other things. Like I can show up to the CUM meeting and I say, "See this glass full of ice? Well, I want it to become fire. So why don't we just vote to turn it into fire? And we can vote, and the vote can pass. And guess what? That glass of ice is not going to turn into fire. It's impossible. There's certain things that legislation and voting can't do." 1 million credits. I agree, Les. You should be able to give out 1 million credits. I'm trying to fight for your right to do that. Cena, do you think it's important to pick your battles, to hold back your opinion when you know it will get things off topic and nothing will change? Yes, I do think so. That doesn't directly apply here, but like, I gave this opinion like a long time ago when I was part of the Rising Winds. If I pick someone, and that person could be a very terrible person who has been toxic to the kingdom for a long time and has legitimate reasons to ban them, and I went after that person, and like I generated all this support, went after that person, and eventually got them banned, and it was glorious. That consumes a resource. You can't see that resource. That resource is completely intangible, but it's a resource nonetheless. To put it in perspective, suppose I did that every week, around the time I'd hit week 3, probably around the time I hit week 2, people would start to be like, wait a minute, this person's going against, like this person's constantly trying to get people banned. Is everything right here? And it could be legitimate. The people I'm going after could be banned. But if you do bring something up all the time, it does consume a resource. I kind of stretch myself thin at being senator, to be honest. I'm probably one of the more vocal people on that board. But I still have to pick my battles and maybe only push something once every few months. But sometimes you do have to realize that the fight's lost. Most people aren't being convinced, and you have to back off. 1 million credits. Long live King Les. Yes, long live King Les. Les doing a great job. Love you, buddy. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. I can scroll up to things I might want to touch on some more. I kind of want to touch on what Zaire said above about senators, monarchs should be able to vote against their kingdom's wishes. I want to touch on that a bit more because I talked about how sometimes people have access to information that not a lot of other people that have. That could be weaponized as well. The idea that someone has access to more information than what is publicly available. Like, suppose I'm in office and I say, I want to ban this person whom I don't like. And so I just do it. And people say, well, why'd you ban that person? And I'll just say, well, sorry, I have access to information that you don't. So sorry, can't say it. And that probably happens. In fact, I've kind of seen that sort of thing happen where like a monarch's given an out of context conversation, they use it to ban someone, and it helps because the monarch doesn't like it, and they don't give the other person the chance to defend themselves. The accused the chance to defend themselves, to even see that, and the monarch just does it. Thankfully, and this I'm bringing this up because this relates to senator. There is a new code of conduct that's being drafted right now, and it actually does give like an appeals thing where if someone is banned and they want to appeal it, then first off, the person they don't necessarily have to be given witness statements, all the information, but they do have to be given a tangible reason why they were banned. Second of all, the person can always appeal, and that kicks off a secondary appeals board, and that appeals board has to contain people who weren't involved with the original ban and aren't in the belt lines or have a direct relationship to any of the people who are involved in the ban, meaning the accused or the accuser. And I'm really looking forward to that new code of conduct. I think that'll fix a lot of the problems that we have in AppGuard. It's based kind of half around the SCA and half around Safe Sport. Let's see. I'm not getting a warning or anything like that. I can just probably keep going on until... But anyway, any more questions? Cena's typing something. Let's see. We will call now your 5-minute warning. And Luna's typing something. Let's see what Luna wants. I'm going to dedicate the rest of this to, where do unicorns come from? I can't think of anything clever to say to that. Someone else wants to take that question. Let's see. Several people are typing. FetLife. That is a very good question. Pornhub is another good answer to that. And Les is going to COC3 me. I create unicorns. Unicorns aren't Viking. Silly Les. When any kingdom officer gets burned out, they should not hesitate to step down if needed. Absolutely. And I don't think there's any shame in doing so. I think that being a kingdom officer, including Les's job here, is one of the more stressful positions. People underestimate how much stress it causes. I've seen kingdom officers gain lots of weight when they are monarchs. I've seen monarchs, lots of monarchs have to step away from the game very quickly after they are monarch, and it's like that. I said, stress and burnout creeps up on you. You don't know it's there. Corona King for life. Sounds like Les here might be the king throughout 2021. I don't know. What is your biggest piece of advice for someone that is looking at wanting to be a senator someday? For some of you came in late, one of the first things I linked, which I am going to link again, it's a YouTube channel that I really, really like. It's called Charisma on Command. It shows you ways to be confident and stuff like that, but it also shows, my favorite videos are the ones where it shows debate tactics. It usually focuses on one person's personal debate tactics. And like I said, it's political. Some of the politicians you aren't going to agree with, but it's important to look at those videos, even if you don't like the particular politicians, because not only are you training yourself to use those tactics, you're training yourself to recognize and defeat those tactics. I highly recommend looking at pretty much a lot of the videos on there, especially the ones that focus on specific like politicians and debaters. Because some of the politicians, like I said, I'll warn you, like Ben Shapiro, you probably don't like them, but they are recognized as legitimate debaters. And they do use tactics, some of which aren't nice, and it's important to recognize those tactics so you can learn to fight them. The other piece of advice, like I said, earlier in this video, how I opened is my biggest advice for someone who is looking to become a senator someday is to don't. Like Friedrich Nietzsche says, or Friedrich Nietzsche, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Interkingdom politics is really stressful. It's not for everyone, and I would argue it's probably not for most people. It is probably the most toxic aspect of the game. It's kind of that sort of a thing where you like one of the phrases I used to use, and I've been monarch before, I've been regent before, I've been champion before, I've been PM before. The monarch is the tank. They tank the stress off of other officers and autocrats so they can get their job done. The autocrats, the warcrats, the champion, and the regent are your DPS. They're the ones doing stuff, getting stuff done, delegating stuff, all that sort of thing. PM's your healer. The senator is probably the off tank. There's a lot of out of kingdom threats that are coming into your kingdom, and he's AOE tanking and off tanking them all, as it says, as the analogy goes. So, but when it comes to being a senator, the other piece of advice is, like Cena said, when a kingdom officer gets burned out, they should not hesitate to step down if needed. Yeah, don't let the stress get to you, and if the stress is getting to you, take a break or step down from office. That's also another important part of picking your battles. You don't want to be constantly fighting, or else that's a lot of stress. That's gonna catch up to you really quick. Any other questions? I am not being bugged. I demand kitty pics to leave off. Well, fine. You and your kitty pics. This is my very, and I encourage everyone else to leave your kitty pics too. This is my very, very affectionate, nice, uploading when we picked her up. Her name is Cora, which is short for Corona. We picked her up because it was. We picked her up because the vet had a deal where all adoption is free and all the medical expenses that come with adoption is free. And boy, did she have her medical expenses. Yeah, and she's a giant sweetheart. She follows us around. She did learn how to meow before she would do what we called pterodactyl screeches, where she'd go, and she finally learned how to actually meow to get what she wants, and that's cute. She usually does it when she wants outside. This is Bella, and she always looks panicked. This is a panicked bleep. We have a cat that always looks panicked, and his name is Clyde. Yeah, that's Clyde's default expression as well. You call that panicked. I could also call that guilty. He looks. She always looks really guilty, and Clyde always looks really guilty. I guess it's time. Fine. Yeah, I should step away so that the next class. Is there a next class? Maybe. Has time to prepare. So thank you, everyone. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or, but I'm on Discord a lot too. Oh, and that's Peter. Probably sitting next to my wife right now. And he is a giant sweetheart. He was also a rescue. All of our cats were rescues. I have 4 of them. But anyway, have a good rest of Polaricon. And that is Julius. Holy crap, that is the really good picture of him. That's him on a heating pad. He is a large, fluffy orange kitty. And that's more kitties hanging out with each other. Anyway, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm available just about anywhere.